Now, 4 government departments have overspent and will need to ask Tynwald for extra funds to cover their costs to the end of the current financial year. The Department of Health and Social Care needs the most. It will be seeking an extra £30 million. There'll also be requests for £8.9 million for the Department of Education, Sport and Culture, £5.6 million for infrastructure and £2.2 for the Department of Home Affairs. This will be voted on at next month's sitting of Tynwald, and the Treasury Minister Alex Allinson joins us in the studio this morning. Now, Minister, we are used to seeing health in particular needing a bit extra, but 4 government departments is quite unusual. Why has this happened?
It is unusual. Good morning. What we've seen, you're quite right, normally we do have these supplementary votes to balance the budget as we get towards the end of the financial year. What we've had really is quite an extraordinary year of very high inflation. We've seen the knock-on effects of interest rates. That's affected DOI in terms of their housing deficiency payments. And also we've seen wage increases trying to keep up with that inflation. And that's caused a wave of increased costs. People have noticed it in their pockets. We've noticed it as a government. And as you said, health and social care, because they employ so many people and they've had wage increases, energy cost increases, but also increases to consumables and drugs as well as to off-island transfers for specialist treatment in the UK. All those have added up. So this is a way of trying to balance the books as we finish this financial year and then try to look forward to the next financial year, which I'll be outlining in February with the budget.
So it is a total of around about £47 million for these 4 departments. Where is that money going to come from?
Okay, and I'm putting that into context with the Department of Health and Social Care. We're talking about around about 10% of their budget that they've had increased costs to deal with. We are not going to be drawing down from reserves. We can manage this increased spending in terms of the increased revenue that Treasury have been receiving over the last financial year. Obviously, it doesn't please me to have to come forward to Tynwald with this, but we're doing it in an open, transparent way to reflect those increased costs. And I think it is really important that in the next financial year we look at our budgets, we look at the way departments spend, prioritise that spend to actually deliver on those outcomes that people really want, which are things like, as you've described in your various programmes, being able to access GP services, being able to access dental services, those frontline key roles that we really need, particularly in terms of health, but also education and home affairs.
You talked there about inflation, about pay rises as well a few moments ago. How do you factor that in going forward then to make sure that we're not in this position again this time next year?
It's very difficult because some of the pay rises that we've seen, particularly in terms of police officers, but also doctors, nurses, teachers, a lot of that is determined by pay review bodies in the United Kingdom. So it is very difficult for departments on the Isle of Man to anticipate what those may be in the future. What we try to do, obviously, is work with all the unions, work with all the staff representatives to get a fair result for them, but also something that can be afforded by the Isle of Man taxpayer.
Now, you talk in your announcement this morning about Treasury needing to work closely with departments to ensure that they continue to exercise strong financial management and control. Has that not happened over the last year then?
It has, but what we're trying to do is put more resources in, give more help and support for those departments to actually identify any risks that may be there, also opportunities, but the risks that may be there in terms of them going over budget. Also share best practice in terms of what's the best way to procure supplies or services throughout government and really drive some of the efficiency savings we've seen, particularly in terms of health and social care, try to get those applied right across the board with all those departments doing the right thing, trying to strengthen that fiscal discipline as we go into the next financial year.
Now, you talked about where this money will come from. You mentioned it coming from additional revenue. I know you've got the accounts in Tynwald this coming month as well. What is the situation there in terms of the financial position?
The accounts, the audited government accounts that we were laying before Tynwald in February are for the previous financial year, so 22-23. Going into the end of this financial year, what we've seen is increased costs across the board, which this motion represents. But we've also seen more people in work. We've seen the growth of jobs, and so we've also seen increased tax revenue and NI revenue, which will balance some of these overspends out. But we have to make sure that as we go forward with the medium-term financial plan, that we're actually earning and spending responsibly, but also not drawing down on reserves, reducing that resilience, and that's what I'll be presenting to Tynwald in February.
Now, in terms of the other four government departments who aren't going to have a supplementary vote, what has been different there? Why have they not needed this supplementary vote?
When you look at the four departments involved, all of them provide very much frontline services, but also all of them employ a lot of staff. So we're talking about health, education, home affairs, and it's really been investing in people through wages, through training, by hiring more staff, that's driven up some of these costs for those individual departments. We've seen other departments, for instance, like the Cabinet Office, Department for Environment, Food and Agriculture, being able to control their spending in a slightly better way because they have slightly more ability to do that. But going forward in next year's budget, we really need to make sure that we are investing in those frontline services, particularly health and education, that are so key for the bedrocks of our society.